Hey, what's going on, everyone? So, it recently was brought to my attention, well, also noticed that The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is now 20 years old, and I retweeted how, incredible that game was and still is. And even to this day, I remembered exactly the moment when I first saw it in video form when I was working for Electronics Boutique at that time, back in 1998. I also tweeted how I find it very difficult to describe to people who love video games but perhaps weren't at the right age how incredible and mind-blowing this game was when you first saw it, and especially when you first played it. Even the words, incredible and mind-blowing, don't put into context experiencing some of the best games for the first time ever back in that generation. That great generation where gaming took the biggest and most influential leap it has ever taken, a leap that just hasn't been surpassed in my opinion, and arguably probably won't be surpassed until we're playing in gaming worlds similar to what we saw in early films like The Lawnmower Man, Tron, and most recently the visually stunning Ready Player One by Steven Spielberg. You naturally hear and see a lot of young gamers today who hear tales of these legendary games and make the effort to go back and try to play them in whatever way they can. And for the most part, opinions can be split because at the end of the day, they have grown up in generations where things like rumble in controllers, things like analog sticks, 3D graphics, surround sound, voice acting, Z targeting, or just general locking onto enemies, open worlds, underwater environments, just general environments, and 3D dungeons have essentially been the norm all their lives, all their gaming lives. I mean, the list goes on and on, but for these gamers, this has always been everything they have ever known, which is why, for the most part now, most of them are only for the most part impressed today when a game looks like real life and has Hollywood-like stories. Case in point, the huge success of games like the recent God of War, The Last of Us, and recently Red Dead Redemption 2. But of course, the industry is much older than these recent games, and in some shape or form, what these games have done have, for the most part, been done in the past in some capacity, especially when it comes to gameplay, music and sound, things that are as integral to game design as some feel graphics are, but with me arguing that the former always are more important. But of course, at the same time, many of these gamers come back and state that many of these so-called legendary games do not hold up, and it's only nostalgia that's keeping them up there on the charts of the greatest games ever made. And, of course, there's no way I can just sit there and ignore such craziness, because there are indeed certain games that are indeed legendary. And regards to the game I mentioned earlier, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is indeed legendary. In fact, I will go as far as saying that it transcends legendary status, because it is simply one of those influential games that is still a template for game design today. And when a game is still influencing games of today in modern games, that's not legendary, my friends. That's transcendence, and transcendence can also mean greatness and perfection. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at how God of War plays compared to Ocarina of Time. I'm talking about the recent God of War, of course. It's open lake area. It's basically Hyrule Field. Its surrounding areas are connected to the hub, the area. Basically, the same way as Ocarina of Time surrounding areas are connected to Hyrule Field. Its combat asks the player to lock onto an enemy with a cursor so you can focus entirely on that enemy, which is basically Z targeting created in Ocarina of Time. Kratos only jumps when he's near the edge of a platform, exactly the same as Ocarina of Time. The lake area changes as the game moves along, same as Ocarina of Time. Your weapons and items are used to access new areas, same as Ocarina of Time. Honestly, people, the list goes on. I done a video a while back where I stated that for me, the N64 is still the most game-changing console ever made, and I tried to explain why I feel that way in that video. So if you haven't watched it yet, I'll leave a link above, so please feel free to have a listen. But It wasn't just the N64 that was producing greatness in that era. It was the generation and the era itself where things were happening that you'd literally never experienced before in not just gaming, but in human history. Because let's remember, our beloved video game industry is still crazy young and has essentially only existed since I've pretty much been alive on this planet, which, once again, in the grand scheme of things, is not very long, people. I'm not that old. Things were being done in games that have paved the foundations of modern gaming today. Some foundations, you can argue, have still not been completely beaten, many of which I still argue for today. That's not nostalgia, that's just pure and simple facts. You could pick up Ocarina of Time today and still find that this game still controls exceptionally well for how the game wants to be played, especially if you play it on original hardware, and of course it was re-released on the 3DS as well. You'll find that the pace of the game doesn't waste the gamer's time with false padding and pointless objectives dotted across a needlessly large and unfocused map. You'll find the music to be nothing but pure gaming delight, rivaling and, in my opinion, beating most of the forgettable and overly orchestrated bump that you hear today. And to continue with that, I've always argued that a good gaming soundtrack is one that you remember and can also whistle and sing back in some capacity. Let me see how many people can do that with some of today's most popular games, like say Bloodborne and the recent God of War season I'm talking about it, and the latest Tomb Raider games, as examples, compared to other recent games like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey and Mario Kart 8. All have plentiful of musical scores that I could hum and whistle back off instantly off the top of my head. Virtually every single NPC in Ocarina of Time is memorable and useful in some way. Every single environment ensures that it becomes ingrained in your head and becomes, in some respects, utterly unforgettable. Not because you might think that the game demands hours upon hours of your time trudging back and forth through those areas, something which it doesn't do, by the way, but because every single facet of those environments were designed with the player in mind and would be walked through and interacted with in some way for gameplay purposes, as well as, of course, the natural need for exploration. And this was designed to perfection by the developers. This applies to other games, of course. One example like Metroid Prime, like I said, being another example. This also leads into dungeon designs of Ocarina of Time. I laugh when people big up tombs and ruins in games like Uncharted and Tomb Raider, declaring them to be the pinnacle of puzzle and level design. But let me tell you, folks, the difference in level design between many of these games compared to the dungeons of not just Ocarina of Time but most Zelda games is just night and day, in my opinion. No need to try to trick the player with eye candy here in Zelda games, or highlight areas that the player can interact with, like glowing ledges, just like you see in Uncharted, Tomb Raider, and God of War. The dungeons in Ocarina of Time were designed so meticulously that the developers didn't hold the hand of the player and highlight what they needed to interact with. Because even before the player got into the dungeon, Nintendo had basically taught them everything they needed to know up to that point in order to leave them alone and let the player work it out for themselves. Dungeons like the Forest Temple, the Shadow Temple, and the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time are huge examples of this. It's not the nostalgia that gets engraved in your head the most with these truly great games, no matter what their age are. It's actually the near perfection of how they were executed and designed to begin with that makes you remember pretty much every facet of them with nothing but pure joy that puts a smile on your face when you recall them and also pick them back up. The nostalgia that is there comes from your most likely younger mind taking in for the first time these moments of joy. As an example, I have a huge nostalgia for Super Mario 64, just in general, but it's because of moments like where you jump And when you first jump through the secret window on the first floor of the castle and then slide down that hidden slide, go play that today, and and tell me that it's nothing but pure fun. Even to this day, with its energetic music, Mario's wonderful controls, and the urge to collect every coin whilst beating your previous time down a slide. This is nothing but pure games design perfection. Finding a secret and level for the first time creates the nostalgia, but that doesn't change the fact that today that game still plays and sounds like a dream, and still has better 3D controls than a large number of games today, and that's just fact. Now I'll say to people, now go back and play Spyro the Dragon and tell me the same thing, because trust me, that's when nostalgia truly gets in the way of facts, people. But anyway, I think I'm done here. Happy birthday, Ocarina of Time. It truly is one of the best games ever made, and if anyone argued to me that it is the best game ever made, I'm not gonna have many arguments against them. I honestly wouldn't. It's indeed one of the rare games that truly deserves that legendary status, and may that never change. As always, thanks for listening. Let me know your thoughts on where you feel that nostalgia might be blocking, in a sense, the facts and reality of a game, or find out some of your truly classic games that deserve all the legendary status they get, not because of nostalgia, but because they truly are sensational classics. But depending on which games you might mention in the comments section, I can't promise that I'll agree with you entirely. But that's the fun of YouTube and personal opinions, of course, and one of the reasons I like to think that you come to my channel. But anyway, thanks for listening all. Take care. Peace.